Josh Hennig back here on 97.3 ESPN along with my special co-host for the day, Kevin Durso. We are live in the Dr. Squatch virtual studios on YouTube and X at Josh Hennig. Joining us right now, as promised, on the phone line, she covers the Phillies for The Athletic, and she was in the house when Jhoan Duran made the triumphant entrance to Philadelphia. You can read more about it in her article over at The Athletic, which I am a subscriber to, by the way. All of you should be subscribers as well. Charlotte Varnes joins us here on 97.3 ESPN. Charlotte, welcome in. How you doing today?
Thank you. I'm good. Thanks so much for having me.
For you, obviously you've been covering this team throughout the year, and, just talk about the dichotomy being in the building. Like, everyone who wasn't there last night can see on television. They're seeing, everyone's sharing the YouTube clips. But talk about just the difference between the mishmash of guys who have come in at the end of a game, right? The Jordan Romanos, the Matt Stroms, or Ryan Kerkering. And now it's Duran and the entrance and the energy. Like, at least for us watching on television, it looked like it was like a night and day electricity.
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly how it felt. And I think part of that is in the entrance. I mean, at CBP earlier this year, I think they did a good job with when Jordan Romano was briefly closing some games. They did a good job with his entrance. But there's a lot to be said just about the electricity that remix brings and turning the lights off and tolling the bell. It really feels like you are about to see a show. And that's what it is watching Duran pitch. It was just incredible. I mean, four pitches and the game's over. I mean, I think I saw on Twitter that the actual entrance ended up being longer than his outing. And it never felt like it was in doubt for a second. It felt like a very, very stress-free inning, which cannot be said for sometimes in late game situations this year. And I covered the A's last year, and it felt very akin to watching Mason Miller come in with the entrance and just knowing that this guy is not going to be hit off of. It was very fun to watch.
You just mentioned about how the different guys who came in earlier this year, looking back at the deadline, obviously Duran getting picked up was, obviously the big move by Dombrowski. Looking back now, obviously, it looks like it was the right move. But looking back, is there a part of you that looked at maybe the moment that trade happened on Wednesday evening to then watching him come in last night? Is there a part of you that said, this is kind of what I thought it was going to be like, or did it maybe exceed even your expectations?
Yeah, I felt like it exceeded expectations because, of course, I knew the name Duran, but I haven't watched a ton of the AL Central, so I wasn't really familiar with his game other than knowing that he was an excellent closer. So getting to see him in person, it really crystallized that it felt like the right choice. And I think at the time when I saw the prospects they traded, obviously Taid is a very strong prospect and McAble has upside as a mid-rotation starter with some big league experience. I mean, those pieces are kind of hard to give up, but the Phillies have a lot of strength at the major league level right now. And when you're a team with World Series expectations, you want to have a guy like Duran on your roster for sure. And I think that having a set closer like him, I think especially after watching him last night, after some of the stress of the late innings earlier this year, I think it really crystallized that having a set closer can be really, really important for your club.
Hey, Charlotte, I wanted to bring up you just established having the set closer. One of the guys who may be leading into the closer role is David Robertson when he comes up eventually. How do you see him fitting into that back end of the bullpen and kind of that bridge to Duran?
Yeah, I think he could be a leverage guy, potentially seventh, maybe the eighth inning. He didn't have his best day at Lehigh Valley yesterday, and we actually just talked with Rob Thompson about half an hour ago, who said he doesn't think that he's going to be ready by, I think the day was August 5th, that he was going to be eligible to come back up here. And just looking at him right now, they like his velocity. They're not loving where his command is, or at least in the outing yesterday. And it's basically his spring training. So I think it's kind of hard to set expectations at this point, but he has obviously been excellent in the past. I could definitely see him seventh, eighth inning guy. Just needs to get a hold of his command. And just, I think once he's past this sort of spring training period, it takes a little longer than the Phillies expected. He could be a strong part of late innings in the Phillies bullpen.
Charlotte Varnes from The Athletic joining us here on Hanging with Hennig on 97.3 ESPN. Josh and Kevin Durso hanging out with you in the 97.3 ESPN studio. Charlotte, overall, obviously, Duran gives the Phillies more structure with the bullpen. We know that, Rob Thompson and Dave Dombrowski have talked about Kerkering and about Strom's roles. What do you project is going to be the typical usage for the other guys? Because, guys like Tanner Banks are out there. Jordan Romano, what do you really think is going to be his job moving forward? Like, do you think it's a scenario like, for example, Kerkering pitched yesterday. So, do you think someone now becomes the Kerkering today? Like, how do you foresee this?
Yeah, I've been really impressed by Max Lazar, and obviously he had a bit of a blip in Chicago, and I don't think that's been explored a ton because that was the day of the Duran trade, so I know everyone who was there was kind of focused on the trade rather than what had happened in the game, but I've just generally been really impressed. Like last week against the Red Sox in one of those weird late-inning games, he pulls out a splitter out of the blue because Real Muto says, hey, I think that the other team has something on you. And he just decides to throw the splitter, which he's never thrown at the major league level before. And I think that he's really gritty. Thompson likes him a lot. He says he's pretty cool on the mound, which I think is true. I think maybe he's not an ideal, maybe eighth inning guy. I think he would be great in the seventh. Same with Tanner Banks, who's just really, really stepped up. And I think similarly for Romano, maybe not as in close games, just because there have been some blips from Romano this year. But I could see him as a seventh inning guy, maybe games that aren't as close for the Phillies.
So Rob Thompson just said a few minutes ago also, it was out there that about Jose Alvarado, he'll be back in Philadelphia early next week, and then he's going to go on a rehab assignment. He's obviously not eligible for the postseason, but what do you see his role being once he comes back into this? Is it somebody that they would want to leverage and put in high leverage situations because he's familiar with it, or because of that lack of ability to play in the postseason this year, would it be something else?
Oh, I absolutely think he is a high leverage guy. I think that they said they're aware of his throwing right now and just the ramp up period that he's had. And I think when he's back, they're going to slot him kind of in those high leverage situations just because that's what they come to expect from him, even if they're not going to be able to use him in the postseason.
You mentioned about the high leverage. Some of the things that we've at least projected about is, the Phillies are basically going to use him up. Like, they're going to basically run him out there until the wheels come off. But I think the bigger concern, Charlotte, is the fact that, Rob mentioned that he's coming back into town before he goes on the rehab assignment. Charlotte, when he first got popped with the PED suspension, he kind of ran away. He kind of got out of town as fast as possible. I'm not in the locker room, so maybe you could answer this question. Do you think part of this is maybe bringing Alvarado in to talk to his teammates maybe before he goes on the rehab assignment?
I don't think he'll talk with the teammates, and that's just a guess, really. I think that he's going to meet with Rob and certainly the Phillies brain trust just to figure out. I mean, they're aware of kind of his throwing and everything he's been doing while he's been suspended. But I think more so it's going to be to figure out what the plan is for just rehab assignment isn't the right word, but just his ramp-up period, because he's going to be eligible to pitch in the minor leagues or not, just ramp up in a few days' time. And I think it's mostly going to be that. I was 1 week in on the job, actually, when Alvarado got suspended. So that was definitely a bit shocking and big news to handle my first week on the job. So I feel like I can't really speak to the teammates part of it in the clubhouse.
Totally understand. Charlotte Varnes from The Athletic joining us here on 97.3 ESPN. Something you can speak to is yesterday when Rob Thompson was asked about Max Kepler. And he brought up Kepler's been hitting the ball hard. Then what does he do that day? He hits the ball hard and gets caught in the outfield. There's a lot of Phillies fans who like the question and I couldn't see who asked the question yesterday because with the way the camera was set up. I'm sure you're familiar with this, Charlie. No one can actually ask questions of Rob Thompson the way these cameras are set up. But, it's one of those deals where it's like the question was like, hey, a lot of Philly fans do not like Max Kepler. And it was like Thompson wouldn't even acknowledge that. Like, it's very perplexing to get a guy like Harrison Bader and then not play him on day one, and then the very next day he's in the lineup. What is your take on the Kepler-Bader outfield dynamics?
Yeah, I think kind of the sense I got yesterday from just Rob Thompson and just watching the game in general, I think they're going to run it out the next few days or next 6 days and just see how things play out with kind of the left field dynamic. Obviously, Bader is starting today. I think they are like Kepler. I mean, that I thought that ball was gone yesterday that he hit early in the game. It felt like a home run off the bat, and obviously it wasn't. And I think there is some point to he has been swinging the bat well or better than he has been. I still think that Bader is obviously an upgrade, both in the field, both at the plate. And I think they're going to give it about 6 days just to see how it kind of looks, playing different, with all them playing these different outfield positions. And I think there's potentially that before they go to Texas, they kind of look at the week Kepler's had, they look at the week Bader's had, and just assess their outfield. And I mean, I think there's a really big potential that they call Justin Crawford up ahead of this Texas trip and this 10-day road trip.
That's interesting you mentioned that, because Crawford is the guy people have been questioning when they call him up. Do they call him up before August 15th, for example? Because that's kind of hanging around that 45-day window for the rookie eligibility. So, like, do you think the Phillies are keeping in factor that, like, hey, we don't want to start this guy's clock too soon? Or are the Phillies saying, who cares about his clock? We're trying to win ball games.
Yeah, I would say it's more the latter. And I think they're looking at Justin. I think that even Rob talked yesterday. I think that they want him to see a little more work in center field. And I think likely if he is called up, he's pulled up into left field just because they feel a little bit more comfortable with him there. I mean, Dombrowski said the other night as we kind of just went over the trade deadline group of reporters with him, he said that they feel comfortable with Crawford playing at the major league level. They feel that he's ready. I think just like I said, I think they kind of want to see these next days out. And I know in the past the Phillies have been slower maybe to part with some players, and they give people a lot of time. And like they said, I think they've kind of liked what they've seen from Kepler at the plate lately, even if it's maybe not resulting in hits necessarily. They're liking that a little bit better, so they're giving him a little bit of runway. But I do think they feel comfortable enough to where if this week passes and things are about the same with Kepler as they've been the entire season, I think there's a chance he maybe is DFA'd and Crawford is called up, and just because they feel they like Crawford a lot and feel really comfortable about where he is at the plate and his defense and left.
You mentioned about Dave Dombrowski. Obviously at his press conference, he talked about on the Zoom call that they want Crawford playing every day, that they're not going to call him up to just be a part-time player. So in your mind, and obviously you can't read Dombrowski or Rob Thompson's mind, obviously, but just in your looking at it, if they were to call Crawford up and they were to DFA Max Kepler, just to go with that scenario, do you think Crawford is the everyday center fielder? Does he bump Marsh to left field and then Bader and Marsh would be the platoon? Like, what do you think makes the most sense under the context that Dombrowski says Crawford needs to play every day?
Yeah, I think it would probably make the most sense given just kind of what they've said about his defense and center. I think it would make sense for him to potentially be the everyday left fielder. And obviously, Bader is an excellent center fielder. That's where he won his Gold Glove in 2021. I think it would make a lot of sense to potentially platoon him and Marsh in center field, and then give Crawford everyday reps in left, trying to get him acclimated to the big leagues.
Interesting. Charlotte Varnes, you can check out all of her work in The Athletic. Of course, you are not subscribed to The Athletic. You should be like I am, and check out all the coverage of the Phillies in The Athletic. And she joined us right here on 97.3 ESPN. Charlotte, great stuff. Really appreciate you jumping on. We'll talk soon.
Yep, appreciate it. Thanks so much, Josh.